Hi, Jacqui. So,
Hi.
so lovely to see you. Thank you so much for chatting to me about your work and about BSL in general. It's just a really lovely sort of chance to really explain a bit more to people who don't know very much about BSL and how it works, particularly for people in the performing arts who maybe haven't worked with a signer before and just don't know where to start or what the process is. So I thought it would be a really lovely conversation that we could have about how that all that works. So can I ask you first of all, sort of, how did you get into BSL? What was your route into BSL, and how did you end up signing for the stage?
So my route into BSL is quite an interesting one. I have an older sister that's deaf. We're very close in age. She's only 18 months older than I am. And of course, growing up, we all learn language through osmosis. It's all incidental, really, when you're very young. And she went off to school when she was 5 and would come home using language that I didn't know at the time was BSL. My family used a home sign, so my parents would gesture all the time, gesticulate, and they're Jamaican, so they were very expressive and voluminous with the gestures. Anyway, so that was my introduction to BSL when my sister started school and began to mix with other deaf children, some of whom had deaf parents, and so were really sophisticated with their use of BSL. And so that's how I started. How I became a professional is a very different matter. That that happened. That was sort of not by accident. It was by need, really. My sister one day saw me grappling with what it was I wanted to do, which was dance, contemporary dance, but what would bring me money. And she said to me, "You interpret for me and my friends. You don't get paid for it. Why don't you become an interpreter?" And up until that point, I thought the people that interpreted were usually social workers. So I did a bit of investigation, learnt that there were evening classes in my local adult education institute in Southwark. And so I signed up. And that was the start of my journey. My journey was quite haphazard because I didn't initially know that I was going to be a theatre interpreter. I just knew I was going to use BSL to help the deaf community.
Amazing, yeah. And so, what was your first theatrical production that you signed for? Did someone just say, "Oh, could you come and do this"? Was it sort of just again a happy chance meeting, or
All my entire career has been chance, Helen.
mine too, mine too, yeah.
I I have a dear friend, and she said to me one day, "Look, Jacqui, Grey Eye Theatre are looking for interpreters for their workshop on the weekend." And prior to that, I had been a CSW, a communication support worker. So I was in academia working for the City Lit, supporting deaf students at FE and HE. That's what I'd been sort of muddling along doing. And she said, "Grey, I, want somebody who's got theatre knowledge." And I said, "Well, I've got dance knowledge, but not so much theatre knowledge. But, I'll give it a go. I give everything a go, Helen." So I went along to a cold church hall somewhere in South London for a weekend Grey Eye workshop. And it was amazing. It was, they were teaching Augusta Bowell, and it was Catherine Hunter, I think, that was leading that workshop.
Right.
And it was fantastic. And that was it. I was hooked.
Yeah.
And so I thought, this is great. I love it. Weekends, I can do all this creative stuff. Now, it's hard work because obviously I was interpreting for entire days. Anyway, that was my introduction to the language of theatre, watching my co-workers, watching the language that they kind of transformed into British Sign Language that enable the deaf participants to partake. And so I did that. And then I met a lovely deaf woman at a disability cabaret Channel 4 had set this cabaret up in a pub in New Cross, and Ali, I can't remember her name, an amazing deaf actor, comedian. She was performing with a trio, and the event was called Laugh. I could have cried, and and she said to me, Jacqui, I'm looking for a BSL interpreter, and I was, oh, okay. She said, but it's going to be at the Mercury Theatre in Colchester, and I thought, oh, I've got two very young children. That's not going to work. And I had a chat with the Mercury Theatre, and they said, yep, she's on a Arts Council trainee directorship. She's going to be based here for 6 months, and we would love it if you could support her with that. So I thought, right, at that point, I'd become a single mum.
Yeah.
And I thought, right, what can I do to make this happen? So I got an au pair.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Yeah.
And I did it. And it was, I was there from the casting process right through the first read through to the first rehearsal, through to tech week, dress rehearsal, and then the show on stage with Ali there, learning the craft of becoming a theatre director.
Yeah.
So that was another steep learning curve for me, but I thoroughly enjoyed the process. And I thought, I actually like working in this domain.
Yeah.
I'm going to do more of it. And it just kind of was organic. People learned that I'd done this work and said, we have a play that we'd like you to interpret. Grey Eye said, we're going to do national touring with this production coming up. Would you like to be the interpreter on the production? The production was What the Butler Saw. And I said, yes, I'd love to do that. And I did that. I had a BSL consultant who came in towards the end of rehearsals to just check that what I was producing and delivering was of the right quality and standard. And then I did this amazing national tour with a fantastic bunch of performers, and I haven't looked back.
Yeah,
absolutely. And so that was my training ground.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Well, we're very happy that you didn't look back, because you've supported us with our Mime Festival performances for a number of years, and we're very happy that you were able to do that too, because you're absolutely wonderful. The number of people who understand BSL in the UK is how many? Do you know how many people roughly we're talking about? How big a community that is?
Yeah, years ago, I was a community interpreter at RNID, and their big slogan at the time was 1 in 7 people are deaf.
Yeah.
I understand now it's 1 in 6, and roughly 151,000 people in the UK use British Sign Language. So that could be the deaf community, interpreters, family of the deaf, friends of the deaf. But of that number, 151,000, 87,000 are deaf people. So roughly 87,000 people, 1 in 6 people use British Sign Language in the UK.
Wow, okay. And is that number, is it increasing, do you know, or is it static, fairly static?
Well, I would say that more and more people are living longer.
Yeah.
And therefore it follows that more and more people are going to become deafened with age. So the number of deafened people will increase.
Yeah.
There are the medical professionals who believe that they can fix people. And so there are a large number of deaf people that opt to have cochlear implants.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other debate, Helen, that I won't go into now.
No, absolutely. Yes, I can appreciate that is a whole other world, particularly, when they're already sort of quite advanced in age. It gets harder, as I understand it. But yeah, as you say, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I come to you and I say to you, Jacqui, we've got this wonderful show. We would love you to interpret for us. And then you say to me, okay, tell me more about it. And then the process from me, that very first conversation, me saying to you, love you to do this, and you standing on the stage and doing it. Can you just talk us through the steps? I'm thinking perhaps about, for instance, Kiss and Cry, which you did so wonderfully well with. What were the stages then for that?
Okay, so it does differ depending on the production and the company. So I'll talk about Kiss and Cry, and then I'll talk about how it works perhaps elsewhere. So the first thing I do when I get the email from you saying, oh, that's great, Helen's contacted me, I love working at the London International Mime Festival. Right, diary open. Have I got time to, first of all, read the script? So I look at the date, and you're really good. You always give me advance notice. So I look at my diary and check that I can actually do the date. And then I work backwards to see if I've got time to prepare for that date. And so preparation entails getting the script, reading the script, thinking about what music might be embedded in the play that I don't yet know about, because I haven't had an audio or visual recording. So factoring that in, time for me to watch that and learn the speed and intensity and duration. And then I look at when I'm available to go along and watch it in situ. Because for me, it's really important to get a sense of how the audience respond live. So I do all of that. And that usually I kind of give myself a month, because of other things that are happening with my schedule. And so I'll get back to you and I say, yes, Helen, is it possible for me to get a script and a recording? Of course, I know that you know these things are necessary for my preparation. And then I say, I can come along and watch it on this particular date. And so you book me in to watch it. And I then get the audio recording or the visual footage. I prefer to get visual footage because I like to see where the different characters interact with each other on stage. So I can think about my role play. I can also think about whether I'm going to give those characters a sign name dependent upon how they're dressed, yeah, or their characterization on stage. Yeah. And then I get the script, I look through it, I think about how will this read in the space, in the auditorium? Where will the deaf people be sitting? What signs do I have to use that will convey the storyline? What decisions do I make around when not to sign? Because it's mime and the performers are beautifully visual. And actually, if I were to interject at that point, I would distract from them carrying the narrative forward. So I have to make all of those little nuanced decisions, those subtle decisions about when and when not to sign, how big my sign should be, what is the right sign to use in this context, because there might be 3 ways in which I can convey a particular meaning. So once that's all done, I do the show.
Very good. Thank you very much.
With other companies, as with Grey Eye back in the early 90s, I would be integral to the piece, and so I would go along to rehearsals. I'd be in the 4-week rehearsal process with Grey Eye. With other companies that I've worked with, 2 days maybe of the end of rehearsal, or at the very beginning of rehearsal, and then I have to remember all of that, and I have to film it myself and keep that as a reference to work with. So it depends on the context, it depends on the play, the demographic, you know, is it a children's play at the Polka Theatre or at the Unicorn Theatre? It all depends.
Absolutely. That's very interesting what you just said about sometimes there are a few different ways that you could use to sign a particular thing. So it's not a fixed vocabulary, it's you feel your way through it, and you can finesse the way that you are going to present a particular section of text.
Yeah.
I mean, so, yeah, I was going to say, so that leads me on to sort of how different are different interpreters? Because I know that we've been told, you know, the deaf community, when you say that you're going to have a BSL interpreted performance, they want to know who it is, who is going to be the interpreter, because it's like having a particular actor in a role. So that's incredibly important. So how different is one BSL interpreter to another?
Well, Helen, the question is about our character. and how we all differ in our characters. So like with spoken languages, we all have a different way of speaking, of expressing ourselves. Also, when you're using sign language, your character, your personality is portrayed. And so it's the same as anyone with a spoken language who works as a professional who speaks a lot. Some people's voice is great. Other people have a way of talking that is quite engaging and draws the audience in. But it's also about how creative the individual interpreter is. So before I was speaking about lexical choice, the choice of signs I use. So there may be 3 signs that I could use to convey a meaning. And I will pick the one that I think is the most salient in that moment because it carries the narrative forward in a way that's in line with the person on stage who is expressing themselves in that moment. And I heard something recently, which was simultaneous dynamic equivalency.
Wow.
And that was uttered by a colleague of mine. And I thought, actually, that is the key to how you convey something. You want to give the equivalent meaning in BSL, because BSL has its own grammatical structure, its own syntax. It's a different structure to English. So it's how you kind of make sure that the meaning is conveyed, because it's all about meaning.
Absolutely.
And we're all different. All interpreters are different.
Totally. I've noticed, you know, when interpreters are doing the news and they're doing it live, it's quite incredible because there'll be a lot of text, and I always get a little bit panicked that then they're not going to be able to keep up, because it's like there's so much text, but they, you know, and you're trying to follow. I always end up watching the BSL interpreter, not the actual presenter. So it's quite incredible that they're able to keep up. But you did that for a while, didn't you? You did the news.
I did that for 11 years.
Wow.
Initially employed by the BBC Direct as a staff, which I did for 3 years. And then BBC sold BBC Broadcasts, and Red Bee Media provided the sign language interpreters after that. So I did that as a freelancer.
Yeah.
But in total for 11 years. And yeah, on average, the news presenters speak maybe 200 words a minute.
Yeah.
And so again, it's about what are the salient points here? What is the meaning? And it's about conveying the meaning.
Absolutely.
So it's not word for word, because like I said, BSL has its own grammar and structure. So yeah, it is hard, you know, especially as it's live news, BBC News 24. You don't really know what's coming because things change, there's breaking news, and so it's about expecting the unexpected.
That sounds like a catchphrase. I think I might have heard that used once or twice before. So with BSL, I mean, it is BSL, British Sign Language, but if you were, for instance, to go and interpret a show in France using BSL, would they understand, or is it really different?
It's very different. LSF is very different. But, you know, there are some very clever deaf people who have travelled and have acquired more than one sign language and can adapt and change their register to pick up and understand. But what I would say is that I would adapt my signing so that it was more iconistic. And so I would endeavour to make sure that my signs were not purely BSL. There is an international sign language which draws upon all the iconic symbols. And so I would endeavour to alter, or actually what I would say is you need a French sign language interpreter to do this job.
Good point, very good. And if I understand it correctly, in America, they sign with one hand. Is that right, or is that completely wrong?
Not completely wrong. In America, the alphabet is on one hand. So it's A, B, C, it's all on one hand, whereas here it's A, B, C. So in America, ASL is, they do use 2 hands, but the finger spelling is on one hand, which is why they can go to a pub bar or wherever, put their drink there, and they just do that. It's a lot easier, more difficult with BSL.
Absolutely, yes, they haven't thought that through at all, really. No, absolutely. So, since we've all been in lockdown, Jacqui, obviously it's not been possible to stand on the stage and do BSL, but nevertheless, work has been continuing. So how have you been managing with that? I understand that you've kind of figured out a way of the things that you need to basically get on with it. And it seemed to come down to 5 things, correct me if I'm wrong. So a green screen, or else because it can be a blue screen, in which you've got there, a phone, a halo light, a fast broadband connection, and an enhanced file transfer service so that you can upload the footage. So with those 5 things in mind, could you just sort of talk us through sort of how that works?
Yeah, so I have a halo light on me at the moment, a ring light, otherwise known as, and I also have another lamp behind that, which is very bright, and I've got a clear plastic bin that I bought from a shop, I won't mention the name, that I've put on top of that big bulb of a light to diffuse the light, so there are no shadows.
Yeah.
And then I have my Samsung phone, product placement. I have that.
It could be the Samsung phone. It could be all sorts of phone. There are other brands available, we have to say.
Yeah, yeah. The important thing there is that it's got an excellent camera. Yeah. And in my halo light, there is a little stand where I can insert my phone. And so all I do is, this screen behind me is blue, but when I flip it on the other side, it's green. And I've also got green behind the green. So if you bear with me just a moment, let's see if I can bring it into shot. Can you see the green?
Yes.
Yes.
Very dramatic.
So that's for, the green screen is particularly for work that I'm going to upload onto a website, and that's going to be superimposed onto footage. Sorry, not me, but a technician somewhere.
Yeah.
So
fantastic.
That's how it works, really. It's not complicated, and many of my colleagues have adapted to that way of working, whether they're working with uploading for a piece of art or a theatre piece. So that's how I've adapted quite quickly in lockdown, and I was supported to do that actually by Diverse City.
Oh right, okay, great.
They were the ones that supported me initially with the idea that I can do this. Yeah. So hats off to them.
If anyone can do it, Jacqui, you can do it. You're a great woman. Brings me on, actually, Diverse City. It brings me on to another issue, really. So for the last festival, the January 2020 festival, we had a particular show which was performed by a group of young men of colours, and we needed a BSL interpreter for that. And it really needed to be someone who reflected the cast on stage. And I was suddenly aware, as I looked at the sea of faces on all the BSL interpreters' websites, what was looking back at me, the people looking back at me were white, largely white, hardly anyone of colour. And I know that's, I think I came to you and I said, help, can you, do you know anyone? And you said, actually, this is a problem, that there are so few people of colours available who wants to do it. It's not that, surely it can't be that people of colour do not know BSL. It's just maybe they don't want to stand on a stage, or they, what have you been doing, Jacqui? Because I think you've been doing some work around that.
I have, Helen. So so when you came to me about that production, I knew of one black male BSL interpreter, and he's very skilled, but I know he doesn't have very much experience of interpreting theatre. And so I approached him. I think I put him in contact with you. And then I knew of an Asian sign language interpreter. And both of these men are very skilled at what they do. And then I thought, gosh, but there are no more. And if there are, where are they? So I put my feelers out, and it was just those two men. And in the end, one of them did manage to interpret that particular production.
Yeah.
So that was great.
Yeah.
But I just thought, you know, this needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
And how am I going to do it? Because Helen, you weren't the first person who had wanted specifically somebody of colour to interpret a production. I've had requests over the years, and it's a struggle. So what I decided to do in December 2019 was to run a workshop. So I emailed all the interpreters of colour that I knew of and said, look, I have a lot of knowledge and skills that I would love to share with you. I know that amongst this cohort, a few of you will be brilliant at it. You just need to be given the confidence and the skill, and we need to explore what it is that has stopped you so far. So the workshop was attended by 11 people. The weekend was, it was a fantastic weekend. We explored why interpreters of colour aren't doing this kind of work. And, you know, the overriding thing was about not feeling safe, not knowing and understanding, and this is real, that whatever we do is always going to be overly scrutinized by our peers, by the deaf community and beyond, because that is the reality. That has been our experiences. And so the safe space that was created for that entire weekend, where we could explore, then led the cohort to say, we need more of this opportunity to share and talk freely and openly about why we don't want to do that work, and to get more training from you. So can you do it again? So I said, well, yeah, but I'm really busy at the moment. So we set up a WhatsApp group. Well, one of them said, come on, let's do this. Let's set up a WhatsApp group. And we did. And we continued to share. And that sharing led into more people joining in the January and February and March 2020, because they'd heard about this WhatsApp group that was a safe space for interpreters of colour.
Yeah.
I then reached out to a few more, and then George Floyd was murdered on the 25th of May, and there was an explosion, and the group grew exponentially because other people were contacting me and saying, I understand there's a safe space. Can I join? I was like, yes, of course, absolutely. And then they would say, actually, there's another interpreter in Scotland or in the West Midlands. There's an interpreter in Wales. And I reached out, and the group has now become a network, a CIC. We have a board of which I am a member. I tapped into a few colleagues that I'd known for a few years, and other colleagues that I knew had will, drive and energy. And I said, right, can you be on the board with me to help steer the ship?
Yep.
Because there's no hierarchy here. I don't know how to run an organization, and I don't want to. So can you guys help me out? And they've been phenomenal. And Interpreters of Colour now has 115 members.
Wow.
And there are 5 interpreters from France who are in the network,
Yep.
1 from Germany, and an American that lives in the UK with her American ASL using client. She's also in the network. We've got maybe 3 students who, one of them's doing an MA in sign language at Wolverhampton, and 2 of them are on the BA course in Wolverhampton. So yeah, so I expect that this time next year, if there's any semblance of normality in the world and the theatres are open again, I will not be the only person being called upon to interpret, that there will be other people of colour who can add their art to any production or any performance.
Wonderful. That is absolutely wonderful. That's just such a brilliant initiative, and obviously much needed. So yeah, thank you for doing that. It's brilliant. The final thing, Jacqui, I just wanted to say was that your recording of Nothing Compares to You, that signing of that song from Kiss and Cry's production, that was filled by Jacob van Dormel for Michel Andermay's choreography. it's had so many thousands and thousands of hits on our YouTube channel, and people just absolutely adore it. It is most beautiful and inspiring. And someone sent me footage of their 6-year-old niece who is learning BSL as a result, and I'm sure that she's not the only one. It's so gorgeous. So I would urge anyone who's not had a chance to watch that yet to just go to our website and look for 5 films, and there you will find Jacqui Beckford's signing of Nothing Compares to You. It is absolutely sublime. Jacqui Beckford, thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you so much for allowing me to share a little bit of my art, a little bit about myself and my process. I hope that that video inspires many people to learn BSL.
Absolutely, absolutely. Take care.